Hey guys, today I want to talk about two unhelpful extremes. They're two places that we get to mentally that they're just not overly helpful. They don't really help us to mature, to move forward, to learn to deal with our problems. It's kind of like two roadblocks. And typically, maybe even sometimes you're gonna go from one to the other, but typically you're gonna maybe have a problem with one over the other. Sometimes you'll keep going back and forth, but typically it's one that you'll have a really hard time with. The first of these unhelpful extremes that I want to mention is we put faith in our perfection. I can do it. I'm great. I don't need anybody else. I've got this covered. I can overcome anything. I'm so strong. I'm so powerful. I'm invincible. Nothing is gonna stand in my way. I'm just gonna plow through everything. We start putting faith in the fact that we have done it, and so that makes us think that we're always going to be able to do it, almost like we can read the future or something. And so we start kind of becoming a little bit of perfectionists in others, and because we think that we are perfect. And so what goes along with this is kind of this idea of pride and ego and narcissism, self-centeredness. It's kind of this whole idea that goes along with it. It's this mindset that allows for these behaviors that then affects your actions, and it's just kind of this trickle down effect. It has big major consequences. So the idea of, I've overcome my addiction, so you know what, you need to do it just like I did it. And, failing to understand that everybody's different. Everybody's going to have different processes. Everybody's going to have different struggles, different successes. Everybody's different. Everything is different. There's just a lot of room for variation and for diversity. So the first, let's talk about a few different ways of why this is an unhelpful extreme. The first way it is because we forget where we came from. We forget that maybe you used to be that screw up. Maybe you used to be that person who was just completely ruled by their fears or by their sorrows or all these different things. Maybe you were that person who was addicted to something, and we just kind of forget where we came from. Like, no, I've been good enough for long enough that I'm better than them, and it's like we start putting kind of attributing more value to us and then less value to other people. Um, Another thing is, what if we mess up? See what I mean? If you've done this thing where you put faith in your own perfection, your own ability to be perfect and awesome all the time, well, then when you mess up, it's going to be life shattering. It's going to be something that takes you a lot longer to pick up, and you're just not even going to learn from it. You're just going to say, "Ah, it was a one-time mistake," and then you start this downward spiral of continuing the behavior, and then all of a sudden, you went from 10 to 1. You were ecstatic, manic even, and now you're all depressive, and it just it's not overly helpful. It doesn't take into account people's imperfections. People are imperfect by their very nature. That's who they are. And so to kind of just take away all of that and say, no, look at where I have climbed. I've made it to the top of this tower all by myself. It's just naive and unhelpful. Another thing is we forget to help others rather than criticize them. Because of how good we have been doing, we just kind of, you need to do the same. Um, we become unrelatable, judgy. We fail to show compassion. We get to be where we think we're everybody else's judge because, look, I've done it. Therefore, I know the only way to do it, and I am just smarter than everybody else. I'm more determined. I'm more disciplined. I'm a go-getter, and everybody else is a sheep. I'm a shark, and they're all the sheep. You see a lot of this kind of nonsense on social media, for instance. Oh, these people are sheep because they think differently than me. Okay. Nothing says I'm prideful and arrogant quite like saying everybody else is sheep and I'm the only enlightened one. Yes, there's going to be times when you understand a certain thing a little bit better than maybe some other people. Like, for instance, if you've gone through something, you're more likely to understand it than somebody who hasn't. It's easy to say, oh yeah, I'll give to that cancer organization tomorrow. But then when it's actually you dealing with it, it's like, oh, wow, it's so much more real now. So we kind of become just kind of unrelatable. The people around us just aren't able to connect with us. We're not really able to help them. We tend to look down on them for their weaknesses, kind of like they're less of a person. And then we get our satisfaction in life from I'm better than you. Because I have done this, that makes me more worthy. And everything in our life becomes about the to-do list, and we kind of try to start validating our own existence by whether or not we can do these things or not. So it just kind of gets where we just come off as judgy, and we just kind of stop caring about people as much. Another thing is with this is we didn't get here on our own. We didn't just power through. There are people around us, or maybe adversaries who made us stronger, or maybe a boss who hired us, or whatever it is. We didn't get here on our own. It's not like anybody's self-made, and even if somebody was self-made, no man is an island. You can't exist in and of yourself for yourself. So we need others. That's really what I'm getting at there. We definitely do need others. We're never at a place where we can say, okay, I'm at the point now where I don't need anybody. I can just do this by myself. You'll never get to that point. We need community. We need friends. We need people to relate to. We need people to help us. We need to help other people. Life can't just be about ourselves. We need others. There's lots of different applications of that. Another thing is when we start putting our faith in our own perfection, we kind of become unpleasant to be around. It's always about us, how great we are, and we become overbearing with advice. No, you're wrong, you're stupid, that's not how you do it, this is how you do it. I know everything because I've done it. Maybe even to the point where somebody doesn't even want advice and you're shoving it down their throat. So then, okay, we're talking about two unhelpful extremes. I've only really talked about one, that kind of, that mindset of, I have arrived, putting faith in our perfection that causes that attitude of pride and ego and that kind of stuff that causes these actions of just kind of being a jerk. So let's look at the second of these unhelpful extremes, and that's seeing failure as fatalistically. It's bound to happen. No matter what I do, I'm going to fail. I'm a waste of space. Everything I do fails. Everything I do falls apart. Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. Let's just all go eat worms or something. Nothing that I do is going to matter. Nothing is going to change anything. It's just, this is doomed to happen. I failed every time in the past, so why won't I fail again in the future? And just kind of this very fatalistic view of things that you're going through. Like, because I have never succeeded, that means for sure I never will succeed. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because, you beat yourself down, so then you're discouraged, so then you mess up and you say, see, I told you I was going to do this, and then we just keep instilling that in us that we can't do better. And then we start believing this idea that no matter how hard I try, I'm never going to do this. So then because we've told ourselves that, and then we believe ourselves because we've been telling ourselves it so much, then that is what happens. And so you just kind of get this repetitive behavior of messing up, and then you fail to understand that I can change, I can do better, I can try at least. And so it's just kind of like I'm doomed. And so this mindset of just seeing things as fatalistic kind of gives us this attitude of just despair, guilt, lack of initiative, that kind of stuff, just kind of lazy, shy, withdrawn, and then that causes obviously the actions, repeated negative behavior. Surprise, surprise, negative reinforcement leads most often to negative behavior. Who would have ever guessed? I mean, there's some times when it's beneficial, but most of the times it's just not. So let's see what happens with this. Well, first off, we never really try. We don't commit to anything. We don't give 100% effort on anything because we've already decided that I'm going to fail at doing it. So then when it comes time to do it, we just kind of, why give a full effort to something that I know I'm not going to do good on? Another thing is we guard ourselves against others. We see people as threats. Everybody becomes a positive or a negative. They will either add to my life and make me have more pleasure, or take away from my life and make me have less pleasure. We don't see people as people anymore. They're all just threats. Everybody's going out there to get me. Everybody's going to harm me. Everybody's a liar. Everybody manipulates. We start seeing people, especially this happens with when you've been betrayed. You stop seeing people as people. You start seeing them as risks. Okay, that's like a level 10. That's like a level 4, and so then you start going through this thing, and everything you do is guarded. Your relationships with people, when you're talking to people, everything is just always guarded. Sometimes you even put up a fake front just so that people don't see the real you, so you don't have to come to terms with them, and so that they don't really get to see the real you, so that way you know you're safe. But the problem with living that safe is it also means you don't really live, and that's a hard place to be in. So we guard ourselves against threats. We discourage those who are trying, not intentionally. But we say something like this: "Oh, okay, well, I hope that works for you. It never worked for me." So I mean, where it's just like discouraging things, not like it's just emanating from us. It's boiling over from us into them. It's not something that we necessarily set out and say, today I'm going to try to discourage this person. It's something where we get there and we're like, I don't have any encouragement to give to that person because I, in my spirit, am at war with myself, which, by the way, perfection is usually just a lack of accepting yourself because you failed, because somebody rejected you, whatever. It causes us to be all the more critical of someone else, because if we can't control ourselves, we try to control other people or the situation around us. Perfection and being a control freak is all kind of related. But let's just go ahead and skip past that for now, because I'm sure we'll come back to that eventually some other day. So we guard ourselves around people. We see everybody as threats. We discourage those who are trying completely, usually completely on accident. The first one, the putting faith in our perfection, those people sometimes tear people down like on purpose, and they're like, well, only the strong will survive. What I found is people who are most judgmental mess up just the same as everybody else. They just have a problem with, understanding God's grace. Even if they say that they're a Christian, they just don't really show the grace that they've been given, which tells me they don't really understand God's grace. And then 2, they're usually at war with themselves, and they'll oftentimes come across as, no, I'm fine. I know exactly what I believe. But the truth is, usually they were like maybe abandoned as a child or betrayed by someone they loved, or there's just something there where it's causing a lot of problems with insecurity and that kind of stuff, and so it kind of just comes out, which surprises me. When I saw perfectionists when I was younger, I just always assumed there's people who always had their act and together. They had their act together. Everybody else were the screw-ups, and they were just the good ones. Wow, have I never been so wrong? So we're looking at the second of these unhelpful extremes. We're discouraging people, usually on accident. We are never motivated to try harder. It's always, oh, I'll do that later. Oh, maybe I'll feel better about it tomorrow. Well, if I do that, it's just too much work, and what if it doesn't work out? And, I don't want to commit that much to something that'll just blow up in my face anyways. And so it's kind of like, not necessarily whiny. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not just saying, hey, stop crying. That's not what I'm saying. It's more of a mindset that I'm going to fail before I've even tried. It's just completely not being fair to yourself, tearing yourself down, setting yourself up for failure, really. So we're never really motivated to try harder because we've never succeeded in the past. We assume that means we never can succeed in the future. But typically all that means is that we haven't been doing it right. If we just change tactics, maybe change views, it's a lot easier to get that success. And then once you've had a taste of that success, it's easier to just keep going. But the problem is sometimes this takes us back to that first unhelpful extreme. And so as a result of all these things, we never really reach our full potential because we've already decided that we're doomed to fail. And we fail to think about the future. Everything we do is about now. It's not about, well, what about 5 years from now? Let's think a little bit further along. So there's just a few pointers I have for these things. First off, learn to connect to others. People are really a great impact, a great influence, a great motivator to your life. And really, life was not meant to be lived alone. That's something that Religion tells us that's something that science shows us. People who are in groups and clubs, for instance, they tend to live longer. Religious people tend to live longer, tend to have lower stress levels, that kind of stuff. Excuse me. So, learn to connect to others. Learn to not see everybody as just threat, risk. Don't learn to see people as not, they're doing better than me, so I despise them for it. Remember that everybody messes up. Everybody messes up. I don't care what they say. I don't care what they look like. Everybody messes up. So you have to accept that. You're going to mess up. It's just going to happen. Don't worry about it, but if it happens, it happens. Like, try your very best on everything. But when you do mess up, it's going to happen. So, obviously, accept it, learn from it, instead of just, that's just who I am. No, learn from it. What could I have done differently? What caused this? All, just learn from it, without guilt trip, obviously, and then leave it. Once you've accepted that you're going to mess up, you learn from your mistakes, and then you leave them. They're in the past. They're gone. Now, obviously, there's a religious element to this too, repentance and that kind of idea, which once again is extremely important for Christians. Oftentimes, Christians go to the two extremes. Either they just, I know God forgave me. Well, yeah, but He still told us to confess our sins, or we go to the other extreme and say, okay, so these are all my sins. I can never do better, and all this stuff. And meanwhile, it's like, okay, calm down. The thing about repentance is, just because you don't feel sad doesn't mean you can't. That's a whole different conversation. I don't want to get into that. But moral of the story being, religious people don't forget the spiritual element of that. And if you're not a religious person, I hate to break it to you, but everybody's a religious person. They just don't really realize it yet. Trying is much more important, though, than succeeding in all these different things. Trying is much more important than succeeding. You may say, well, what if I try and I fail? Okay. It's not as important whether you succeed every single time, but that you try. Trying is much, much more important than succeeding. And efforts are never wasted. Even if you try and you fail, the effort itself is never wasted. It always produces good results, even if it's not the results that you wanted, even though maybe sometimes it's long-term results. So the two unhelpful extremes, again, putting faith in our perfection or seeing the future as fatalistic, it's just doomed to happen. And so there's just some ways to get through them. Remember those things, and I think that's a big step towards moving forward. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you guys later.